Good morning. My name is Nuruddin Ashraf and I will be presenting today an explanation of both the prescriptive and descriptive perspectives of English grammar analysis, examples of both, as well as a comparison between those two sides of linguistics. First, with prescriptive grammar. Prescriptive grammar specifies how a language should be used by having scholars of this ideology impose delicate rules on the language of a certain community. A prescriptivist view of language implies a distinction between good grammar and bad grammar, and its primary focus is on standard forms of grammar and syntactic constructions. Examples of prescriptive grammar rules can be found in practically every guide to good language usage, grammar rule book, or grammar guide. The classical examples of prescriptive English grammar rules that seem to be broken more often than not include, for instance, object forms of pronouns should not be used in the sentence initial or subject noun position. Only one noun or noun phrase can play the role of sentence subject. A sentence or a clause should not end on a preposition, also called stranded prepositions. Example, this is what I came here for, or where are you going to? Singular subject nouns or pronouns should have singular pronoun references. Example, every student needs to open their books on page 20, or nobody did their homework. In the subject position, the pronoun who should be used, and in the object position, whom is appropriate. Example, I gave it to who I always give it, or who did you talk to? With non-count nouns, example, money, water, or equipment, little or less should be used, and few or fewer is for countable nouns. Example, I work in a small office with less than 20 people, or the crowd that comes here gets fewer and fewer every year. Moving on to descriptive grammar, in essence, it is the study of a language, its structure, and its rules as they are used in daily life by its speakers from all walks of life, including standard and non-standard varieties. That is, descriptive grammar describes the language, its structure, and the syntactic rules that govern the language, its structure, that govern sentence and phrase constructions. A descriptive study of grammar is non-judgmental, and it does not have the goal of determining what represents good or bad language, correct or incorrect structures, or grammatical or ungrammatical forms. A descriptive grammar is typically studied by linguists, anthropologists, ethnographers, psychologists, or other researchers who seek to identify how the grammar of a language is actually used in various contexts and for various purposes. In this light, sentences such as him and me, we are neighbors, or I don't know nothing simply reflect how the language is used by its speakers. Among other considerations, a good descriptive grammar also takes into account cultural and social variables that in any cases determine how language is produced and understood. As for other examples of descriptive rules, a lot of Spanish speakers tend to use the infinitive form of a verb as if it was the imperative form. Instead of mirad, it's common to hear mirar, but also instead of vestios, meaning to dress up, they say vestiros. The infinitive with the os reflexive pronoun added to the end. This is, however, seen as incorrect in an elevated register. As for the Arabic language, traces of the descriptive ideology can be found in Arabic split into al-Fusha and al-Ammiyya, the former being defined by various delicate grammatical and syntactical rules, while the latter, commonly labeled as street language, is defined by its speakers' constant shattering of those rules, so much so that Ammiya vocabulary alters and replaces most of al-Fusha. Finally is the myriad age-old debate of the usage, usefulness, and purposes of descriptive and prescriptive grammar in regards to literacy and language standardization. To explain the descriptive and prescriptive grammar conflict and their practical characteristics, most linguists or language hobbyists are likely to be descriptive grammarians who analyze and explain a language's uses while most practicing teachers probably work with prescriptive grammars. There are arguments for both. As descriptive grammar heralds prescriptive grammar, one cannot prescribe and enforce the standard use of a language before thoroughly studying and describing the use of said language. In other words, despite the negative views held in the eyes of most linguists towards prescriptive grammar, it is difficult to provide clear descriptions of grammars that are applied in both speech and writing. This, on the other hand, requires the creation of approximations and exemplars. The existence of prescriptive grammar is thus needed to determine the accurateness of these exemplars. Furthermore, descriptions of grammar often as a point of reference rely on standard prescriptive grammar as a means of gleaming the level of grammatical correctness of any unorthodox use of a language. Thus we arrive at the conclusion of this presentation. As a summary to refresh our memory, we explained prescriptive and descriptive grammar, their significance in the linguistic field, as well as examples of both. This has been Nuruddin, and thank you.